Hey, this is Jim at Broadfield. Thanks for joining us for another Broadfield Liquid Lunch and Learn every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Today, we are starting off the show with our nice little pre-drink festivities. Instead of grabbing an IPA from the fridge today, I grabbed a Bali Tropical Mango Sparkling Water with 100% agave tequila. That's right. Love tequila. Let's see how these are. That's like drinking a lemonade. These are the types of drinks that you will really sneak up on you quickly back by the pool. But we are going to be joined by a special guest for today's show. Dan is joining us from Matrox to introduce the Convert IP series. Hey, Dan, welcome to the show. Cheers. What are you drinking there today?
I got a red ale from Griffin, the Quebec beer right out here in Montreal. So I'm representing the local beers here.
That's awesome. I love it when our guests come on and they're partaking with some of their local flavors. Next time you make it down to New York, you'll have to bring us some.
Absolutely.
So Dan, I invited you onto the show because we want to introduce to all of our dealers the Matrox 2110 product line, featuring, of course, the Convert IP. Broadfield is really seeing a huge opportunity in the SMPTE ST2110 workflows. A lot of this is being driven by the new Panasonic Kairos systems and, of course, the Matrox Convert IP. As Dan is going to illustrate, it is a perfect tool to really help round out your projects and your quotes to let your broadcast and media companies take advantage of this new AV over IP. Maybe not so much as new, but definitely to the point of adaptation now, where we see a lot of opportunities going. Dan, instead of spending a lot of time talking about and introducing the technology and the products, I know a lot of our dealers have been looking at the ST2110 for quite a while. So I would like you to take over the show, introduce the Matrox product line, and really talk about how it can fit into all of their different workflows.
Sure, be happy to, Jim. I'm going to give a 2-minute quite quick intro as to how we got to this state with the video over IP infrastructure.
Yep.
So let's get kickstarted. You know, Matrox makes a number of video infrastructure products, and totally we're talking about basically transmitters and receivers. Those are the endpoints. Those are typically cameras and displays, although they could be other devices. Processors, those are devices that put signals together, create the signals, and finally, you have to find the components to route the signals to and from all these various devices. So in the olden days, that's all done SDI. We all know that well. But the SDI router, the main core of the whole network, is being quickly replaced now by off-the-shelf network routers. And as a result, it'd be nice to say in a pure live environment, IP environment, you'd have nothing but IP in and out of all those devices. But the truth of the matter is, not every device is IP ready. The migration timeline between baseband signaling and pure IP is happening at various states depending on the type of equipment. So for a long time, we're going to be working in a hybrid environment where you may have the core components be IP based, your switching, your processor, your vision mixer, but some of your cameras and certainly some of your displays, many of your displays are not going to be ready to be pure IP. So I'm here to talk about where Matrox's components fit in. When you're talking about signal routing using IP, what Matrox components can help with that transition from baseband production to IP infrastructure production. So as we mentioned, SMPTE2110, it's actually the first uncompressed video over IP format. Been around for about 5 or 6 years, but really starting to take off. And it's got a companion format, which is a compressed format using the codec called JPEG XS. And a number of companies are starting to make use of this just so they can fit more signals onto their network. So SMPTE2110, quickly, it defines audio, video, and metadata and how you package those over IP, both compressed or uncompressed, and also has a very strict timing mechanism to ensure all those signals can live on the network and be precisely time frame accurately. There's also another standard called NMOS. NMOS is an API, open standard API, lets different devices register themselves on the network and allow their signals to be routed to and from each other so that different companies can operate equipment on the same network, but be routed and compatible with each other. So we're big on open standards here at Matrox, and I'm going to introduce our Matrox Convert IP, which in fact makes use of both of those standards. So we have a number of Convert IP devices, a stack of them, but the ones that are most and there's a whole, I'll bring up the data sheet later to show you the differences between all of them, but ultimately I'd like to talk to you about probably the most interesting applications for these devices in the broadcast and media space, and it's the signal monitoring aspect of things. There's an awful lot of HDMI monitors and SDI monitors that are installed in various environments, and there's no obvious solution to connect directly 2110 directly to those monitors. You make use of a converter like this to make use of existing equipment or brand new inexpensive HDMI monitors to be able to view all those 2110 signals that are on your network. These devices can also convert the other way. They're actually, it's great to monitor, but in many applications, you actually want to convert from the SDI or HDMI space and put that content onto a 2110 network. So the quick elevator pitch for these converters, they're standard based. They're visually lossless, but of course, when it's uncompressed, it's perfectly lossless. But using JPEG XS, these are very lossless codecs. You could not visually see any difference from uncompressed. And most importantly, with that compression, we're 0 frames, or we're talking about lines of delay versus frames of delay when you compress and put the specifically now with the Convert IP, can do uncompressed and JPEG XS on the same product. We can do HDMI and SDI, they're different converters, but the signals they create are interoperable with each other. We support 10 gig and 25 gig fiber networks with some devices, or 1 gig or 2.5 gig copper, and even 10G copper networks with other devices, and you'd use compressed workflows typically on those networks. We can do color space conversion from RGB to YUV. And finally, we support this -7 reliable transport, 2 network connections. So you can have 2 independent networks. And if one network goes down, your content is completely backed up and being transmitted on the second network. So I'll just quickly go through what the devices look like. We have audio on the far end, analog audio on the far side, often used for monitoring. You have your primary and your secondary network, media network connections. These are SFP based, so you put 10 gig or 25 gig in there. The SDI version has a SDI connector that's 12G capable, so 4K capable, either as an input or an output. And the Genlock signal, it's an interesting solution to be able to output a Genlock signal based on the 2110 timing, the PTP clock on the network. We can generate Genlock signal from that so that all of your legacy SDI, say PTZ cameras, can still be used and firing in sync with the more generalized PTP network. We have an independent control LAN. So many people like to have control independent from their media network. So a separate control network to let you run the web page or receive these NMOS commands to advise for which routes, which signals they should be listening to. And that same network connection, that RJ45 connection, is PoE capable. So you don't need to use this separate power connector if your network switch is PoE capable. Very convenient. So fanless designs, so quiet. They won't make noise if you have them in a quiet environment, monitoring environment. Really a great product. So we have a brand new feature we introduced just last week at the IBC trade show. One of the broadcasters who saw it called it crazy clever use of our -2 redundancy connectivity. We like that term. We're not sure if we can use it, but we really like it. And the reason he found it, crazy clever is because it drives down the cost of total ownership by minimizing network ports on the switch. So you're going to appreciate if you have many HDMI monitors throughout your facility, and you need to monitor dozens or even hundreds of HDMI signals, taking a single cable and driving one cable per network per signal from the switch to the monitor would mean you need a lot of switches. And anything we can do to reduce the cost of switches and reduce the cost of running fiber will be great. And that's what our daisy chain feature does. So quickly put, in standard network connectivity, when you're using -7, you have two networks, one primary red and a backup blue. And both of those signals are sent, both those cables are sent to the Convert IP. When you talk about daisy chaining, we can eliminate a lot of those signals coming from the switches by, in fact, looping signals from one point to the next without having to go take the signal all the way from the switch. Now, it's going to appreciate if they're co-located on a monitor wall, that's very good, so that a single data center fiber could be sent from the switch to the monitor wall and not one for each device. So I'll go into it a little bit further. This is an example of two devices driving two monitors, and each of those devices can see any signal, video A or video B, but I must send a cable per device, and then the device decides what it's going to listen to. When you have daisy chaining, you eliminate two of those wires coming from the switches, and you daisy chain them. And those cables are bidirectional, of course. It's a standard network cable, it's bidirectional. So we do something clever, and we use the -7 ports, our redundancy ports, to be able to share information. So we actually put two signals on a single cable. We maximize the use of the cable bandwidth, and then we can make both of those signals available, both those video signals available to all the devices on the daisy chain. This is in 4K. In 4K, we're talking about 12 gigabits per second. So on a 25 gig network, you can fit two 4K signals on a single fiber. However, when we talk about HD, you can fit quite a bit more. In fact, you can fit 8 HD 1080p 60s or 16 1080i's. And that same principle applies. You can daisy chain a lot of those devices one after another. So again, the name of the game is reduce the amount of switches being used, and that drives the cost of ownership down, really makes it attractive for the broadcasters to pick up this box. So, like I said, I'm not going to go through this comparison chart. There's an awful lot of differences between each one. That's all available on our website. But I've highlighted what I think the broadcast and media space is most interested in our Convert IP lineup. I'd like to talk to you about another solution we provide in the 2110 space, and this is a media routing appliance. Now, Conduct IP uses just the APIs to tell receivers what signals to listen to, and registers transmitters into the network controller to ensure that all devices are aware of all the 2110 sources and receivers on the network. So this is not, we don't just route Matrox devices. This solution can route any 2110 signal with NMOS control. And that vast majority of broadcast signaling today on 2110 uses NMOS routing. Now, our device is a web-based UI. You log into it and you have a web-based UI to do the routing operations. We have a lot of user management rights, so multiple users could access just certain devices. So it's quite a sophisticated tool that way. And we license it by number of video port. You can have a number of inputs. You can have 20, 50, 100, and more. And you would purchase, your customers would purchase that based on the amount of devices they have on the network. This is one of the main motivations to build this, because they have been existing for a number of years on the Pro AV space. The broadcast space is that in the Pro AV space, there is no non-proprietary routing solution like in the broadcast space. So there's no opportunity for interoperability on the control side in Pro AV. Now, NMOS routers are fairly expensive in the broadcast space, but they are very feature rich. So we don't expect to have a big opportunity in pure broadcast. But in other live productions, these could be a great solution where the customers don't need the sophisticated routing solutions available by the big broadcast manufacturers. So maybe niche in broadcast like labs, but a number of other areas would find it very interesting. So this is, let's just, I'm just going to bring up quickly, this Conduct IP in action. Let me see, put this up. So this is the actual web UI of the Conduct IP. What I'll quickly bring up attention to on the right-hand side is all the devices that were discovered. In fact, there's more devices. I've just filtered the ones that are being used. There's a number of devices on our network. Now I'm just going to filter the devices that are being used right in this particular demo. And as you can see, we've called it the Kairos, the Kairos a video mixer. Could be any type of vision mixer, but that would be the central processing, the central creation tool, where you have cameras contributing to the production. We have some projectors or displays, let's say, that are outputting from the Kairos. We have some multi-viewer functionality that comes directly from the Kairos, but wants to be put back into the 2110 environment. So this is a visual representation of the signal paths, but of course, Kairos has many inputs and outputs. I could expand the Kairos to show you the various inputs and outputs on the device. 4 inputs, actually 8 inputs, 4 outputs. This is not where you do any of the routing. And this is a routing tool, not a mixer. It's a routing tool. Just send signals from point A to point B. So I would have a kind of a standard cross-point matrix here that shows all the devices. Now, I'm going to expand these as well to show the various inputs and outputs on the Kairos. So on the sender side, we have cameras. I have a Kairos multi-viewer out, and I actually saw this in use at IBC, where the customer took the user took the DP output of the or the video output of the graphic cards from the Kairos and wanted to make that multi-viewer signal available to all devices who are on the network for preview purposes. So what we're seeing here right now is camera 1 goes into input 1 of the Kairos, camera 2 input 2. Output 1 of the Kairos is driving projector 1. Output 2 is, I could go ahead and route that differently. Should I see fit, the multi-viewer itself is driving a multi-viewer output. So I've just changed now, for instance, one of the signals, but I can't see that represented in here. It just shows me the connections. But in my panel, I can see all of the connections that are active at any given time. There's a lot more. I can do deep dive into this. I spent a whole hour going through all of the functionality, but this is a liquid lunch. I don't want to overload on the technical details at this point. Okay, so I thought I would show, at IBC, we just came back, so it's fresh on the brain, and interoperability, something was important, ensuring that various devices work with each other. That was in full effect at the show. The first thing we showed, and this was at our booth, is the brand new Red Connect JPEG XS 2110 output from the Red camera. And they contacted us a few months ago. They wanted to see if our Convert IP could convert that to an HDMI necessary to see what's going on with the camera, what it's actually, capturing and routing. And so our demo essentially consisted of the Red camera being controlled and routed by our Conduct IP media routing solution, and driving a 2110 signal JPEG XS to our Convert IP DSH, and we're previewing that on an HDMI monitor. The picture quality was the cinematographical broadcast, cinema broadcast. This kind of look that Red provides is apparently going to be very big in the live sports production market, or any live production where you want some depth of field effect. You need that softness in the foreground and background to really make it look make the person shine. So we expect this is really going to take off in the live production space. Another amazing application that we saw wasn't even at our booth. It was one of our customers' booths. Involved the Kairos, and here's a picture of the actual setup of the Kairos setup in a booth at one of our German partners, Panasonic partner based out of Germany, does a lot of projects in Germany. He actually had, the Kairos network set up with 2 Convert IPs taking the DisplayPort outputs from the Kairos, putting them into the network. The 2110 feeds coming out of the Kairos, of course, the production feeds were going into the network as well. But the multi-viewer generally is shown locally, but they wanted to make it available to anybody on the network who had access to it. Now, amazingly, there were 36 Convert IP receivers throughout this demonstration. So every screen in that whole booth, and it was quite a large booth, was being driven by Convert IPs. There were only 4 or 5 signals actually coming out of the Kairos, but many of the monitors wanted to be driven by those signals. So there's a total of 36 devices, Convert IP devices there. And because these are standards-based, they were using another competitor to conduct IP, another NMOS controller called Human Interface, or HI for short, by a German manufacturer. Again, worked without a hitch. It was a great testament to cooperation with industry, where Kairos signals were compatible with the Convert IP, as was the routing protocols provided by HI. One quick note on technology that Matrox is promoting. It's coming out of AIMS, the same group that promotes ST2110, is a new standard called IPMX, and it's a standard that will become, we believe, increasingly important in a number of markets because of the additions it adds to the 2110 standard for Pro AV specific workflows. These include things like HDCP, which is content protection coming out of set-top boxes. EDID support, different resolutions, going to be supported, and having a GPU communicate to having a monitor communicate to the GPU to tell it what resolution is its preferred resolution. A bit more I/O formats, RGB, non-16:9 resolutions. All this is going to be added as a must into IPMX. But the beautiful thing is IPMX and 2110 will interoperate on the same network. Going from 2110 to IPMX will be a breeze. Not necessarily every IPMX device will be supported by 2110 devices, but that's something, there's an opportunity there as well for manufacturers. But it expands on the capabilities of 2110. And I bring it up because Convert IP supports both of those. And in some markets, we may find IPMX really take a foothold. So the low-lying fruit for Convert IP right now is really for monitoring, and any major broadcast operator, live production studio that's considering 2110 should be looking at these devices. Large arenas, including the new Vegas Sphere is a 2110 environment. We actually installed some Convert IPs into there to drive those large internal screen, that single large internal screen within that venue. But there's a number of other locations, and this is a monitoring solution for these locations. It's great, but IPMX may find some foothold in military or government applications that are more security conscious. Some college campuses where compression is very important. They want to drive some compression down. There'll be more compression formats available in IPMX. And there's going to be overlap. Some places they want to have 2110 media plants, but there will be a place for IPMX as well. Outside the primary production, they still want to have conference rooms contributing and using the same network. And this is where IPMX may be interesting. So in the corporate, and I call these in corporate mini plants in particular, and JP Morgan Chase is one example, they're a proponent of IPMX. They have SDI and 2110 in their studios, and they want to be able to take some of that signaling outside of their studios and some of the conference rooms, and they're looking to IPMX for that. So, stay tuned. This product is ready for today with 2110, and it's future-proof with IPMX tomorrow. So I thank you, guys. I laid a lot on you. I'm going to pass it back over to Jim to do the wrap-up, and I'm going to enjoy my beer because I haven't had a chance because I've been talking too much.
Dan, thank you so much. What I really like about what you illustrated with those IBC examples is the scalability. Once you start putting AV over IP, it really does give you that routing capability and flexibility to scale your productions to any monitor that happens to be available. And that's where Matrox's product line really helps build and scale these 2110 workflows to allow your customers to set up exactly what they need for whatever the production might be. It could be a small to a medium to even a large house of worship, or as Dan mentioned, the Las Vegas Sphere, where you're doing this giant esports arena that is really built to be the showcase of a new industry. And they're implementing this ST2110 workflow with all this great stuff. Dan, the other thing I love is you mentioned Panasonic Kairos, you've mentioned the Red Connect, of course, the Matrox Convert IP, the Conduct IP. These are all products that are available from Broadfield Distributing. We have our workflow sales specialist, Glenn Seaman and Logan Seaman, available to help you build the right quote to offer to your customers. We work very closely with Matrox, with Panasonic, with Red. We can make sure that we get you along those right lines. So when you have opportunities where you're working on some of these new broadcast and media solutions, we'll help you kind of pay attention to what the products are that are needed along the way. What are some of the new questions that get asked and answered with these new workflow solutions? So Broadfield can help you every step of the way along those lines as well. So Dan, rest assured that our dealers and myself will be reaching out to you to ask some of these questions for sure.
Absolutely. Looking forward to getting those questions and maybe having a beer with all of you at one point.
We'll take you up for that at the NAB New York show. We are going to have Matrox included in the Broadfield Pavilion at the NAB New York show on October 25th and 26th. Matrox, I believe, is going to have their own booth there as well, right, Dan?
That's right. We'll have a few representatives. I, unfortunately, have to be somewhere else, but you'll see Jim McLean and our Angus Mackay are going to be at the show answering all those 2110 questions that you guys might have.
That's great. And in the Broadfield Pavilion, we have Matrox set up next to the Panasonic Kairos and the Red Connect. So we will be demonstrating some of the workflows that Dan talked about today. Maybe not to the same level that was demonstrated at IBC, but we're going to get darn close to it, you know. I don't know if we need 36 converters, but maybe, 3 or 4.
It was a great testament. I didn't even expect it, to be honest. When we got there, we knew they had a few. We didn't think they were bringing that many to do that setup. It was quite a surprise. We were pleased to see it working out.
That's the beauty of saying that we need a few converters. It could be anywhere between 3 and 40, and you can still use few, right?
That's right. And that would be a small studio. A real studio would have hundreds. So, sure. Good opportunity here for everybody involved.
Absolutely. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for the informative webinar. This is going to be available for archive on Broadfield.live, as well as Broadfield's LinkedIn page. Tune in every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for more great stuff like this, lots of new products. We actually have Panasonic on deck to join us in the next few weeks to talk about their side of the ST2110 workflow with the Panasonic Kairos systems. If you have questions today, reach out to your Broadfield sales team or to Glenn Seaman, our sales engineer, and tune in every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Until next week, cheers.
Broadfield Distributing is a value-added distributor of live production, streaming, video editing, and storage products. We only sell to resellers. We are always looking for new dealers, so call us at 1-800-634-5178 or email sales@broadfield.com. You'll like doing business with Broadfield because we make it easy to do business.